It's just joining now. Hello, welcome to We Create EDU. This is our hangout on the tips and tricks. Of course, Willie, you just joined literally as I was hitting broadcast, so welcome as well. Yeah, again, welcome to this hangout. So this hangout initially started because I was monitoring or just going through our general and some of our Slack, and lots of people are always discussing sort of things that they do in their processes and are asking questions. And Kim kind of mentioned there's kind of a lot of consolidated learned wisdoms among us, but we don't always have time to go back through and read everything. And then we sometimes have repeated questions. So this is kind of like a chance for us to share some of these. So then we could kind of all take these learned wisdoms and apply them to our own work. So I will, sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Betty. My channel is called Articulations. I make videos about art and architecture. So I'm going to get everyone on the who's currently on to introduce themselves right now. So Kim, why don't you start?
Hi, thanks, Betty. My name is Kimberly Harrison, and I run a channel called Socratica, and we make advanced math and science videos. And we also have a kids channel called Socratica Kids, and that's also math and science, but introductory math and science.
Awesome. Kimberly, why don't you pick the next person?
Oh, okay. The next person I see is Tristan.
Oh, all right. My name is Tristan Johnson. I'm the host of Step Back History, which is a current events and history documentary channel. That's it.
Awesome.
Oh, I gotta pick the next person?
Yeah, pick the next person.
Let's go with Jacqueline.
Hello, I am Jacqueline, and I run SciJoy, which is like a hands-on science and engineering channel. And how about Micah? Do you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Micah. I'm one of the co-creators of Neurotransmissions, which is a channel all about the brain. And that's about it. I do mostly psychology videos. And I'm going to pass this on over to Canubis.
All right, hi, I'm Willie from the channel Canubis, and basically I make weekly science and social studies videos of varying topics. Right now I'm just exporting a video on parallel universes I'm making as part of a collaboration.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm just pulling up my list of questions. And I kind of thought we would just kind of dive right in. And then we'll also, if you have any questions and comments, if you're watching right now, feel free to leave them in the chat. And so, yeah, kind of going back to a couple of weeks ago, Kim, you had posted, that you had met up with some people from We Create EDU, and you were discussing some kind of batch audio processing process or procedures that you had discovered that you were doing that kind of was really saving a lot of time. And again, as somebody who doesn't know very much at all about audio and video editing, I was just wondering if you could share some of that
Sure.
with us.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So I think maybe all of us are sort of in the same boat where we're self-taught. I don't have a background in audio engineering or editing, nothing like that. But what I found was that I was just learning as much as I needed to do this one project, and I never really advanced my skills. So I'm so glad we're having this hangout. But for audio processing, what I recently found is that in Adobe Audition, there's a whole separate window you can open and drag all of your files into, where you can batch process. So if there's something that you do to every file, this would be a good thing to do. And there's another element to that where you can create your own favorite series of events. You record them, and then you save that as a favorite, and then you can use that in batch processing. And so that's sped up my audio editing a lot. I still go in and do tweaks to each individual file, but I get all of the basics done in one go.
Let me just unmute myself. So like, can you give like an example of like something that you
Sure.
would do in that? Yeah.
So for instance, in every single one of our audio files, we create a room tone. You know, there's like hum everywhere from our computers and the refrigerator and all of that. So we take a print of that. And so I've learned in Audition how to record my taking a print of that and then subtracting it out, doing noise reduction from all of my files. So that would be one example of a batch process. I always want to do noise reduction. And it's silly for me to take the noise print, go to a specific file, subtract it, and then start the whole process over again for every single file. Whereas I can do that once and treat all of my files at once. And so I do something like that. I do a compressor, like we've made a specific compressor that works well with our ambient noise and recording capabilities. And so we compress all the files at once. And then we set the volume constant for all of the files at once. And, you know, a couple other things like that, that I can't believe we didn't automate that before, but we didn't know. We just didn't know.
Yeah, so that's very interesting because I don't automate any of these things. So
we didn't for years.
Yeah. So does anybody else on the panel right now have like a similar sort of experience? Because I know, like personally, I don't use Adobe Audition. I use GarageBand. So, does anybody else kind of have any other comment on that?
I can add a couple things, which is that this kind of also fits into Audition, which is that in the multi-track editor of Audition, you do have these sort of batches of tools that are put together based on what kind of content you're putting through. So they do have some default for voiceover, for ambient noise, for all kinds of things like that, that cover all of the major tweaks you're going to do to a voice recording. Things like normalization and attenuating audio and making sure that the voice is amplified and things like that. They even have presets for things like podcasts, which make it a lot easier for someone who's not trained. Because as someone, I actually did go to school for audio engineering at one point in my life, so it saves me a lot of time. But on the note of like not using Adobe and things like that, it's there is sort of like an aspect that I would put out there, and that is if you really want to take this kind of work seriously, you got to, and if you can, please invest in tools, because working with Audition, working with all these tools will make it a lot faster and more efficient, and it will make you sound a lot better. Like GarageBand's great to get started, but at a certain point, you're going to have to really dig your hands into these things, because you'll just be saving yourself so much time by investing. The other thing I would probably recommend doing too is that if you want to reduce the amount of time you spend processing your audio, is to there's a term we use in audio engineering school. I'm not exactly sure if it's exactly couth, but you can't polish a something, and that is to try and get your recording done in the best environment with the best equipment that you can get your hands on, because after something's recorded, there are things you can do to fix it, but for the most part, starting with the best recording at the beginning is really going to save you a lot of time in the long run.
For sure, and that goes for video too. Like there's that saying, "We'll fix it in post," and that's just the worst thing ever. If you can do it right when you're in the studio, just put in the extra time and get it done right to begin with.
I actually, speaking of that. Making sure your environment is good. I have a very specific question for you guys that just came to my head right now, because I'm trying, my recording studio is right over there. I'm trying to improve the situation. Do you guys have, is your flooring carpeted where you record?
Yeah, we have hardwood floors everywhere, but we've put rugs as much as we can, like soft rugs. And when we record in the studio, we've put up noise canceling, like wall hanging type things. But there's still echo, it's like, unless we carpeted the whole thing, there's still going to be echo. So
I'm actually thinking of trying to make a deal with one of my suppliers and trying to, so that I can get my floor carpeted, because I feel like that might help, but I just wasn't sure like to what extent it would improve the situation. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tristan?
I mean, I don't own the place that I live in, so I don't have a lot of options. But I am, at some point when I get a magic giant pile of money, I will probably get some audio proofing for this room. But this is like a solarium, so there's not really much I can do. I will say the one thing I do invest in is I have a big comforter over here that I put over top of my desktop tower while recording to reduce the noise as much as possible. And I will do stuff like, before I start recording, I will turn off all of the like heat, close the windows, turn off all of the temperature stuff, turn off all the other computers and the electronics in the room. Sometime I'll make sure I'm not like doing something weird, like running the dishwasher or doing the laundry while doing a video. Just as I said, try to just do as much as possible to get everything as quiet as you possibly can while you're doing your principal photography, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
My approach is a bit more basic when it comes to audio proofing. Like, I just have my microphone. I have this little pillowcase right here. I just put it right over. Seems to do the trick.
Interesting.
Better than my old stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah. I actually have it's behind a curtain right now, but I have my the laundry rack that I used to hang my clothes on when I'm recording. I take all my comforters and I hang it over that, and I wheel it into my studio recording area.
That's smart.
That seems to help to an extent, but still.
We have a friend who records audio for books, and she goes into her closet and records there. And yeah, her audio sounds great.
Hotel closets are actually like the secret tool that a lot of the NPR journalists swear by.
Oh.
So they end up recording a lot of their reporting in hotel closets.
Interesting.
I honestly, for voiceover kind of things, instead of just A-roll, I make like a little pillow fort for myself. I have like a mattress thing in the ground, and I make like a pillow fort around me, and that's the best audio that I get. In addition to what you guys are saying, we try and get the best equipment. When we were the first like grant thing that we got, that was our first purchase, was better microphones, and that reduced the amount of audio like editing and fixing more than anything else we could have possibly done.
Yeah, another thing, you can grab one of these off Amazon for about $100.
What are those things called again? I feel like you told me this before, but
it's an audio shell, and you see if I put it in front of the camera like this, it sounds a lot better. Because it catches what are called early reflections, which are bouncing off of the wall in front of me, and takes care of it. But you can get one of those on Amazon for about $100. And if you are in a sort of tough situation, if you're trying to like put together something really low budget, it's a pretty good thing to grab.
That looks great. That looks great. We tried something.
I would love to get one of those.
Sold. Awesome. Okay, so I think I'm moving on from that. Willie, before you earlier before the show, you had messaged me saying that like you had some thoughts about some things you can do when it comes to having like someone who does have a weekly upload schedule. And that is also something I'm very impressed by because as someone who does not have a schedule, and my uploads can vary from like like the next week or like 6 weeks later. I am interested, for those of you who do have a more regular schedule, how you do it. So Willie, if you wanted to start.
Well, I guess kind of what it boils down to for me, well, obviously, first probably has more to do with like my personality more than anything. Like whenever I get the ball rolling on something, it's not easy to get the ball rolling, but once I get the ball rolling, it just keeps rolling. Like like several months ago, I broke a streak on Duolingo that was like 600 days long, but yeah. I think one thing that has helped me a lot recently was using Google Calendar to help schedule ideas in advance, because one of the things that actually took me the longest was just to think of a good idea, to make a video about. And like, you know, just like, is this an idea that people will be interested in? Is this a video that will be within my realm of knowledge or something I could easily research? And is it something that I can actually marry myself to for a whole week of production? I guess another thing that helps me save time is that when it comes to editing, I'm actually kind of a fast editor. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I just get those keyframe animations out pretty quickly.
Yeah, actually, what you mentioned about the calendar thing was actually one of the next points that I had on the show notes, which is sort of like I wanted to get everyone else's opinion on, like do you schedule episodes in advance? Like how far in advance do you schedule? Do you do batch recording, or do you record individually? And sort of like, how do you find that? How do you find like those types of systems, and what works better and what doesn't?
Well, I'm totally stealing Willie's idea about Google Calendar, because that's fantastic. I always have this plan, like, you know, oh, in a couple months, there's going to be an eclipse. That gives us plenty of time, you know, and all of a sudden it's here already. And so I really need to learn to pick the day when I'm going to release it and then work backwards and say, okay, you need 3 weeks to get this video out. You know, you have to start working now. I have not been disciplined about that at all. And so I know I need to introduce that.
I will say, if you are batching, I used to batch and then I kind of stopped for other reasons. The thing about batching is that you do have to really change the way that you approach things. Like if you're going to do a batching system, you have to, I think it helps. It helps a lot if you can do it, because if you switching tasks is difficult, and you can get way more on a roll if you say do research for 3 or 4 or 5 different videos instead before you started doing the next subject. And yeah, I mean, it saves you a lot of time in the thing, but it does require, like, you'd have to start looking at your production a month at a time rather than like, or even 2 months at a time, which can be good for some people, especially for a lot of educators, because your stuff doesn't change all that much. But if you want to be responsive to something going on in the world, that it can be a little bit difficult. Even when you are doing quick turnaround stuff and you don't have time for batching, things that make it quick to set up would be to have your shooting location always primed to go so that you could just turn it on and start shooting. Other examples that might be good examples are getting familiar with whatever editing software you're using, the quick keys, and sort of getting used to that stuff quickly. For example, when for me, I use Premiere, and I have some quick keys for the ripple edits and things like that to make just cutting faster. Another thing too is that if you're into moving assets around in animation, I found it's a lot faster if you place all of your assets first, like figuring out what you're going to put in before you go and animate it. Like, I feel like if you can find out whatever chokes you have in your process, and find out how to switch from like how to keep doing one task repetitively over and over and over again until you have to switch to the next one, you're going to end up with saving time by doing that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I try and batch record, because I think this was a question later on. What if you don't record in the same space, or like that space isn't permanent? So my lab goes from building to production to research. Like there's different modes, and I take things out and bring things in. So sometimes batch recording is nice, because then I set up like all the lights and everything, and that's all ready. Or like when I take it out, since it's not permanent, I actually put tape marks on the floor where I need to put the lights back and the cameras back and all that stuff. So it's easier. So that helps me. But on the flip side, when I go all the way straight through with something, sometimes it helps because then when I'm editing, I just recorded it and I know, oh, skip like the first 10 minutes, like that didn't go well, go over here, and this is the better edit. And then you were talking about putting out videos consistently. I didn't do it on YouTube, but I did it on Facebook, Instagram, TV, like LinkedIn, a couple other places. I was doing like daily videos for 30 days. I was trying to do it for 100, but that didn't quite go well. I had a lot of travel. And the best way for an education channel that I could think of to do something like that was I had them learn with me. So instead of having to do all the research and figure out everything and doing the deep dives that I usually do, I flipped it around and then I was like, you're going to learn along with me as I'm learning this thing. And that's how I was able to kind of churn out more videos at once.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and sorry, one last thing sorry to the audio stuff. If you're in Premiere Pro now, I don't go to Audition that much. Premiere Pro actually has like all these tabs at the top that you can go through and like change your color corrections, change your audio. You can highlight everything for you. It does the auto levels for you. It does some denoises, it does compression. You can change like the auto match. Like it's getting a lot better. It used to be pretty terrible, but it's a lot better. So if you use Adobe stuff, a lot of that's already baked into Premiere. And if you want to do a little bit better, you can go over to Audition, especially for the noise print capture. It doesn't really do that in Premiere. So.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And thank you, Kim just posted, or actually, Micah, if you could put that in the chat of the, or the YouTube chat of this set of Adobe shortcuts.
Yeah, Kristen just mentioned that, you know, finding the keyboard shortcuts, that's something that I think I've added them gradually as I've worked more and more on Adobe, but they really, really do help. You know, like using arrows to jump to the next frame, or, you know, using a shortcut to make a default transition. Things like this can really help speed things up rather than going through menus and finding the thing you want and dragging it over and all of that, if there are things that you do repetitively. So there are some I only do occasionally, and so I'm not going to memorize that shortcut. But the ones that you do often, like extending a piece of footage to reach a certain point, those really do come in handy.
Mm-hmm. Good old ripple delete is one that I had to set myself. One other thing I wanted to add on to that, when it comes to like searching or saving time in producing tons of content and research time, but it kind of gets into the question that just got posted in our little chat here too, which is that when you're researching subjects for videos and doing stuff, I would honestly like try to think of when you're going to go into a batch of research, when you're going to read a book, or if you're going to go into a bunch of articles, to think about several videos worth of content to come out of these things, because not only will doing research on one subject net you a bunch of different video subjects, but on top of that, the videos you do post, you'll probably be able to very easily point them to each other, which gives longer watch time sessions and all of the weird voodoo mystic of stuff we do with the YouTube recommendation engine that that will help out. So it nets benefits in the long run, because you'll save time on doing research because you're researching one thing and getting like 5 videos out of it. But on top of that, the videos will promote each other as you release them.
That's actually a really good idea. And for me, that kind of happened accidentally a couple of times, where I was researching something that I thought was like a really simple topic that was like, this is gonna be a 4-minute video. And then it turned out to be so complicated that if I were to have made it all into a video, it would have been 20 minutes. Now I had kind of contemplated doing that. I'm like, maybe I'll just do like longer format videos, since they're, you know, people tend to watch them more now. But then I'm like, well, like the people who watch my channel aren't really used to that, and also like this is crazy. So then I ended up breaking it up, but it ended up working out that way, that, you know, it saved the time in the research portion. So
yeah, no, it's a brilliant idea. I don't think this is something that we have done consciously, but thinking ahead of making interlocking topics, especially when you're planning things out using your Google Calendar, that's so smart. Must make a note.
Awesome.
ton of time, and also make content that is mutually beneficial to each other.
That is for sure. Okay, so let's just see. So so Micah, we kind of just answered Chico's question, I believe.
Yes.
Was there anything else? Sorry, I have not been monitoring.
Well, there's been a lot of conversation about coming up with ideas, whether you grab stuff from other work that you're doing in order to use it in your videos, if that's a way that you save time, so to speak, or more easily come up with script ideas. Any feedback on that?
Awesome. Okay. So.
I mean, I find that your audience is always telling you what videos to make, and you have to just fend them off with a stick for the most part. But another one is, I don't know if you can get on this circuit, it's great, but there's this like history academic press that has me on their email list, and they're always like asking me if I want review copies of books. That always helps.
Nice.
And then, yeah, looking for important anniversaries. I would probably say that if you're into science, which I know that is roughly 175% of the people on WeCreate.edu, I would imagine just I imagine this will cost an arm and a leg, but just keeping a subscription to the flagship journal of your field will probably a couple times a year just give you a bunch of articles that are basically on all of the subjects that you're going to be talking about, because it's all the newest and biggest things in your discipline. So like if you're a biologist, if you subscribe to, or if your institution is subscribed to, just like, there's got to be like a journal just called Biology out there. If that's the case, then just subscribe to that. And then, every journal article is some big breakthrough that's happening in the field right now. So there you go. There's your next quarter of content.
I just want to clarify, we love all our science technology friends. This is so not versus them situation. So
Cheryl from Roving Naturalist wants you to know that she's out there. No, actually, Tristan, along that same line, if you can get a press credential, essentially, you can actually get access to embargoed articles and stuff like that. So you can actually gain early access to new stuff that's coming out, and then that way you release a video on the same day that that article gets released.
I just screwed something up. Sorry.
That's how SciShow does it. They just get the latest issue of the academic press's journal articles, and they just chart them out over the next few months. It's how I think all science journalists do it. So,
yep, absolutely.
If your article is getting if this article is getting published in like biology, then like it's the thing biologists will be talking about for the next year. So you might as well do it.
Totally.
Wait, Jacqueline, do I have a screen sharing request from you? Am I just not doing it? Sorry.
I don't know. Can people see my screen share?
You're more like the science with clipboards and lab coats. Can you speak more to this than I can?
Was that a question for me? I'm an engineer. I'm not a scientist.
It's for Kim. I don't know if it.
Oh, for me.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really smart idea to keep up with your journals. I will say though that it's tough to go from what appears in a journal to what will appeal to the general audience. Like the more you are a specialist in a particular field, that one journal article may only really be accessible to about 50 to 100 people.
Yeah, you do a lot of legwork.
Yeah, it's hard to know what is the minutia and what is actually like a monumentous move ahead that everyone else should know about. And I think that's where a lot of trouble arises for, like newscasters or general news reporting. They don't have the context to know what is actually important, what is actually moving the field forward. And so I would be very cautious about trying to find that bleeding edge and report on it, because we see how it blows up in the face of most news reporting.
I think that's a good point, because actually when you mentioned that, Tristan, I realized actually, because I get subscriptions to like Canadian Architect and Canadian Interior Design magazines, and yesterday I was flipping through and I was actually thinking, oh, some of these could be interesting topics. But then, like, I think about how I made a video on building occupant loads that I think is the most fascinating thing ever, but a lot of the other people were just like, no. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a balance.
yeah, this is definitely why you shouldn't use like journals like the Journal of RNA DNA reverse transcriptase studies, but more like the ones where like they are general enough that like it is like the top journal to get into. Like these are the studies that are going to be the contenders for like the Nobel Prize in a year and stuff like that. Like it's the big journals. So I imagine that if you're getting published in those, that it's not just like a small incremental.
You know what? I don't know if I would agree with you there, Tristan. I have a Nature paper, and I can dine out on that the rest of my life. But no one wants to know about that topic. Absolutely no one. Like 50 people in the world. So no.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So getting back, sorry, Jacqueline, I just want to get back. Were you going to talk about, was it an audio thing that you were?
Yeah, there are two things, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead.
Everybody.
No.
That was a good conversation. I don't know how well everyone can see this, but this is what, if you're in Premiere Pro, this is what it looks like. And if you go to the audio essential panel over here, you can actually pick like presets. If you started here, you could pick dialogue, and then you could go down to like balanced female voice is what I usually do, because it's usually just me talking. You can change loudness. It will auto match if you select all your clips. I don't have my hard drive plugged in. That's why it's so mad at everything. You can repair things. It's not great at repairing. There's some dynamics you can add, and you can move up and down the clip volume. So there's a lot of things you can do automatically through there. They have other panels too, like graphics. If you're doing motion graphics, they've done, my computer's going to get really mad now, but they've done a lot of things with that. And you can have templates that you can click and drag over, and you can create your own, and you can make adjustments pretty simply. So it's a lot more automated, and you can make templates where you change the colors and fonts and things to your, whatever you're doing for your particular channel. So it's more like you can change the fonts and everything over here, and then save it as a preset. So it's more to your branding. And then I'm going to try and screen share one more thing if it will let me. We were talking about how do we pick topics, and can you see the Asana board now?
Yay, yes, I can. I use the same thing. I know, after work.
So one way you can do it is, there's two different ways to look at it. This is how I know how many topics I can handle in a month. So I put all the videos in these sprint boards to see what I'm supposed to be doing every month. And it's easy to click and drag if I miss it to the next month. And that's when I know if I have too much or too little. And then if I go to the individual month, you can do like a Kanban board. So you can have your backlog, your queue, your in progress, in review, and anything you're waiting on. So you can move the tasks for each video over like this as you're going through. So it gives you a better idea of what you have left and what you can accomplish. So those are two things that I use.
Jacqueline, can you give a little more information on that program that you were just showing, Asana, it looks like?
Yeah.
It's awesome. Sorry.
Yeah, I can show it to you. And I have a video that I made for Tim, because he's the other person on SciJoy, that I explained to him how our Asana board worked and how he must use it. So I can share that with everyone too. But I'll bring the screen sharing back.
I'm curious if anyone has a similar program that they use for PC.
Trello is on web. That's very similar to that.
And so is Asana. Asana's on web.
Yeah.
He has a PC and I have a Mac. So
Yeah,
So it's free.
I use Asana at work, so it's web based.
Yeah, so Asana is a person. Yeah, personally, I think it's very good when you're working with a team. So I personally use Todoist because it's usually just me. But it has the option of like adding other people if I happen to be working with someone else. And Todoist is also web based. So.
Oh, you guys do not want to see the machine. I have a thing.
So go ahead.
Let's do it.
Sorry.
Sorry, Tristan, you can, what's your machine about?
Oh, I have My Life Organized, which is basically almost a cybernetic brain for remembering literally everything. But it's way more in depth than like these programs. And it's like for people who are really ready to go hardcore into this stuff. But I have like a step back video template that I'm always updating that has every single discrete step from like just looking for ideas to like completion and the whole video being out and everything.
So for mine, I have a list of the videos here, and then I add these other projects that they're a part of. So it's 2008 February sprint, and I call it a hub video for us. So then I can either go look at it in the whole year view, or I can look at it in the month view that I have, or if I click on this, it goes to the actual steps that I needed to complete. And this project's actually done, but you can also assign steps out. If you're in 2-person or more team, you can assign who has each of these tasks that you're doing. And you can look, and it has a burn down chart to see how many things you've done and how far you've progressed. That's kind of like a basic overview, and I can show you the video too. Do you have any specific questions that you wanted me to go over?
No, I was just curious because right now we use a series of folders in a Google Drive, and it works okay, but that just looks very neat.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the notes for this video so people can watch it more in depth. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the next question. We're kind of covering like a lot of these questions back and forth anyway. But yeah, so one thing that we talked about like audio, and we kind of got on to a little bit about like video editing as well. So yeah, do you guys like also use things like templates and presets for video editing as well?
We do for certain aspects of our video production. We organize most of our videos into playlists that have a defined look and feel, and like have a set of graphics that we reuse. Like Jacqueline showed how you can now save a graphics preset, and we just started using that recently. And so we make up a template for a given video, and we just start our editing using that template. I think it probably saves about an hour to 2 per video, but it's enough that it's worthwhile setting them up.
Yeah, an hour or 2 could totally, it could add up in being a lot of time when you're making many videos.
I got to get into that. That's the thing that I don't do enough of, and I need to. That's because I'm always fiddling with my style, so I never like get comfy in something.
That's the thing, yeah. It took us a long time to get there.
And sorry again for Adobe people, but you can create libraries of stuff too. Like I have a color library. So there are 6 SciJoy colors, and they each come in like light, medium, and dark. So we use those, so you can make color libraries. You can save different assets in there too that go across multiple things. So for the whole Adobe suite, if I'm making a thumbnail, it goes in Photoshop. In Illustrator, it's used there. Like the color schemes go across, and then we pick fonts, and they have free, I think it's like Text Kit or something like that comes with it. So you can go on there and you can favorite you can put little stars next to your text that you use for your branding. So we have 2, one is like headline and one is like body text. So it's just easier to use that kind of stuff.
What about, Willie, do you also use, are you also in the Adobe atmosphere?
No, I use Final Cut Pro. Although
Me too, yay.
Yeah. Although I do use Photoshop for things like drawings and like those little flag map animations and that sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and I do think a lot of these concepts are interchangeable. And like personally, like, yeah, I do also have like, because I'm very particular about like font and the text, like design of my titles and stuff. So I do have a lot of presets in Final Cut Pro. But it's also very finicky and doesn't always work the best, in my opinion. So, but it's one of those things where it's like, I kind of like, yeah, because like I'm kind of like partially in Adobe because I'm using like Photoshop and Illustrator and things for creating assets, but I'm then in like Final Cut Pro and GarageBand for like editing and stuff. Like I'm trying to think about like, is it worth it to like switch over to a different atmosphere, to like learn something new at this point, to have it all in a consistent, like, yeah, in a consistent atmosphere? Or is it just, I'm just trading one problem for another? So
it's such an interesting question because, yeah, we started using Adobe right from the start. But I will tell you, it's still to some degree, even though, like, for instance, After Effects and Premiere are linked. They're dynamically linked. And so once you do something in After Effects, it'll show up in Premiere and vice versa. But I think because these programs started separately, there's still to some degree a walled garden between them. And they have their own workflow that works best for you. And there are many, many times where I'm thinking, why isn't this working? And then I'll remember, oh, I can do that in After Effects, but not Premiere, something like that. So I think no matter what, you still have to learn the individual programs.
Right.
Yeah, something I've actually found out recently is that apparently PSD files from Photoshop actually import perfectly fine into Final Cut, and you can actually
it does.
Split apart the individual layers.
Oh.
But I'm still yet to figure out what I do with that information. So
Okay, because yeah, I'm always saving and exporting my PSDs to like a PNG or JPEG because I just assumed that's what you had to do. So,
I mean, I do the same. I just do PNG anyway because that's a higher quality.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think I'm gonna skip some of these questions. Actually, maybe I'll ask this one. This is kind of, for some reason, this is kind of a controversial question, but maybe not, depending on what your answer is. So this next question is, so for those of you who are on camera, do you use a teleprompter? And one, do you find it time saving, which it probably does, but two, like, do you find it that it's, because I know there are some people whose question is that they don't think it's as natural or whatever, but I was just wondering what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Oh my.
I do use a teleprompter for certain videos. So if it's a highly technical video, 110%, because if I mess up one word in there, that messes up the entire meaning of the video, and it really matters. So if it's us doing behind the scenes, or I don't know, just some of our more recent videos that don't matter as much with the technical aspect, then I don't use a teleprompter. But if it's something that's highly researched and highly scripted, I really, it saves me a tremendous amount of time. It takes a little bit to get used to using a teleprompter and not being like super robotic and moving your eyes. But I use PromptSmart. I can upload my scripts to Google Drive, and it uploads it to PromptSmart, and it has voice recognition because I record alone. So it moves as I'm talking, which is extremely helpful. It still gets me frustrated sometimes because it moves too fast or too slow. But it helps me a lot, and I make the text as big as possible, and I put it lengthwise, and that way my eyes aren't moving side to side as much. I do it like as narrow as possible for my eye movement, and it does help me tremendously to go through and make sure I have everything. And when I didn't use it and I was doing highly technical stuff, Tim could tell when he's like, you're doing your thinking face again. And he could tell when I got to the end of something I could remember. And I was like, what is the next thing supposed to do? So I don't make the thinking face anymore because I work more, now that I use a teleprompter, I work more on inflection and energy than I do thinking, is this technically the right word that I'm supposed to be saying? So for the more research stuff, I think it helps me tremendously.
We also use the teleprompter. We don't use it 100% of the time, but absolutely when we're working with hosts, some of our hosts are so professional, they could memorize a script, but then it has more of a canned quality, actually. Then there's a sentence, and now I have a second to actually think, oh, I'm thinking about what I'm about to say, depending on how fast you read. It can actually help with your performance. That as Jacqueline said, you don't have to have that thinking face. And for some of us, that's quite angry, that thinking face. You can really turn off your viewers. When we're making a more casual video, especially if it's Michael or me on camera, then we can go off of just a bullet point list, and that's fine. But yes, for the highly technical stuff, especially if you're used to trying to get your videos down to the most concise explanation, and you want to get to that point across as clearly as possible, as quickly as possible, I find the teleprompter is invaluable for that.
Yeah, I've gone between using those on different occasions. I used the teleprompter when I was in the YouTube space because I wanted to save time. But as those videos age, I'm finding that I like the way that I presented less and less over time. And like I started learning in the last like 6 months or so that videos that I spent days and days and weeks putting stuff into to do all the little things correctly don't perform half as well as a video I toss together in 2 or 3 hours that is just bullet points. And I think it has to do, I think it very much has to do with the kind of personality you have and what kind of things you have to do. But like when I was doing teleprompted stuff, a lot of the jokes that I think up and a lot of the verbal quirkiness that I try to put into things all comes from kind of spur of the moment situations, and writing jokes doesn't seem to really land as well for me. And so I'm slowly retiring doing scripted videos and going more off of a bullet point list. Even when it comes to technical stuff, like I guess it would have to really depend on the situation. But when it comes to the situation I'm in anyway, I think more like a lecturer than someone who's giving a paper at a conference, I guess, if that makes sense. And so I think that just with the way that my brain works, it's better for me to explain how things work without a script than with one. Because otherwise, I feel like when I'm reading a script, sometimes I will just kind of lose my head in the actual subject that I'm in and just be like in the business of reciting words and acting. And I feel like that makes it feel less authentic. And a YouTube world, if you don't look authentic, nobody is going to follow you. Like there was a good tweet that came out by Hank Green recently that just showed that the less polished and the more authentic and real that you can be, the better it is for YouTube, and the more that you'll be alienated from like legacy media. And then the more you go into legacy media, and the more polished and scripted and prompted you are, the less YouTube's going to embrace you. And so you really have to really optimize for the platform and learn how to have that improvisational, loose idea, because you have to get yourself across to an audience. They have to build that relationship with you, or else.
Yeah. No, actually, it's interesting you brought that up, because that was something I kind of wanted to talk about, but I didn't think it would actually apply to this conversation, but in a way it kind of does. So yeah, in the chat, Astro Coffee 42 says, yeah, it is, using a teleprompter is better generally better if you want better precision in information, kind of like what Jacqueline was saying. And Cheryl said that she hadn't used it before, but sometimes she wished she had one, because memorizing her scripts and reciting them, meaning filming, can take 1 to 2 hours. But she also worries about that it might make her sound more robotic. And that is something that, yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I had also noticed too before, when I didn't use a teleprompter, the video would take me like probably double or sometimes three times the amount of time in trying to memorize, but then that saved a lot of time. But you do run into that like very ironic, oxymoronic, I don't know, problem where like, yeah, like the more professional you look, I think this depends on the channel. I think it depends on the content that you're trying to convey. Like I think like some people's like channel like has more of that, like, so yeah, like the humor and the personality and like whereas like some other channels are more like focused on like maybe like, yeah, like the precision in content. So I think it's important to balance that.
And there's There's two different ways I record too, though. When I was doing memorization, I think this was a Hank Green trick I learned. I would do the same part over and over and over again, and then when I would edit it, I would know like all of section A, like paragraph A is all together. But when I do teleprompter, I actually do it all the way through, no less than 3 times. And by the 3rd time I'm doing it, I kind of improvise a little bit more, and I'm a lot looser. And I know that that last take is probably going to be the right take. And it's because instead of worrying about memorizing it, I'm reading it and I'm getting to know it better. And I know what's coming. And that's just how it kind of works for me. And I do usually 3 run-throughs with a teleprompter, which is also, like you were saying, it's still faster for me than trying to memorize.
Yeah. Betty, who was the person who asked in the chat?
Oh, sorry, asked, or I just kind of commented, or there was a couple of comments from Astro Coffee and Roving Naturalist, and Alliterative, I think that's probably Mark, who just said, I use the teleprompter most of the time. Don't think I'm as good going off script, but I did do some videos while traveling and we didn't get any complaints about it. So
yeah, I would say if you are somebody who is debating about what to do in these situations, to experiment about what you feel most comfortable with. But I will say, even though I know that we're all geeky, like academic-y people who feel uncomfortable if we go too far off of the prepared notes. But honestly, like try recording with just jot notes and just have like the essential facts and essential ideas through. And if you really understand the subject you're doing and you shoot with that, think about it as if you're talking to a friend and explaining something to them rather than giving like a lecture. Just watch, see how it turns out, and you might end up being surprised with what comes out and being even more surprised with how YouTube responds to it, or how the YouTube community responds to it. Because I do think that while the clean, fresh-pressed, very factual content can work, I think that it does kind of limit you out of the format. Like it is very much going against the grain with what this website, what has been shown to work on this website.
Yeah, I think that you're right, Tristan. I think the ultimate skill would be to be one of those people who can do both, like to be able to essentially have a script and still retain that sort of natural feel. And it is a trade-off. I think if you're using a teleprompter, it saves a lot of time. You save in terms of your filming time, editing time, just like adding closed captions to the video. But, on the other end, you lose sort of that essence. I don't know, the natural presence that you might bring to the screen. It can get stilted or can get compressed. And,
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what kind of content you want to make and how much time you have. And, I think also practice can improve that. But yeah, I don't know. It is a trade-off.
Yeah, being good on teleprompter is a really, really tough skill to master. The people who are really, really good at it, the professionals who work with it, people like Stephen Colbert, for example, they actually have full-time teleprompter assistants who are able to help them move the text forward, backwards, pause, speed up, and slow down live so that he can sort of improv off of the lines that are in the prepared script and reply to things and pause for laughter and like all these kinds of things. Like it, to do like a straight teleprompter run without having like an assistant can make the content feel more like a presentation. But if that's what you're going for, then definitely do it. But I do think that it's not exactly what YouTube wants, if that makes sense. But if you're making stuff like for a classroom, then I feel like a lot more teachers would respond well to something like that.
Cheryl had a related question about the closed captions, which is, how about closed captions? Do you clean them up if you don't use a script to remove difficult to understand language we use in our natural speech patterns? And so she actually brings up something that was one of the questions I was going to ask later, which is about like adding captions to your videos. That is the one thing I did notice is like is when after I started using a teleprompter, like there was a lot less. It was a lot less work just in the closed captioning process, because it was mostly was what I had written down as a script. So, but I still kind of go in, because there are still changes between what is the script and what I record, and then I adjust then the closed captioning to be exactly what I said, and then I just auto sync that, and it really cut down my closed captioning process from being like, again, like an hour to like 20 minutes. So I don't know if you guys, those of you who also do closed captioning, if you have also suggestions on how to speed up that process.
Yeah, I just straight up copy and paste the scripts and then let YouTube do the timing, and then just come back to it. By the way, a little side note: has anyone else been having like some troubles with the caption things?
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a known bug that they're working on.
Yes.
I know it's not a good thing to do, but I've actually stopped doing closed captions until they fix this bug, because it's kind of a nightmare. What I do, and I actually did this once for transcribing, actually for like academic research, I did once, which was uploading the video, getting the machine transcription, and then just fixing it.
Yeah, that's what I do. For the ones that aren't teleprompted, like I've been doing a lot of off the cuff ones, and especially when I was doing daily videos that were going up to like Instagram TV and all them, I would upload it to YouTube, even though I wasn't posting the videos there. I would have it auto-generate. Then you can download it. You can copy and paste it into Excel, and then you delete you only look for unique values. So it gets because it adds extra spaces. So it gets rid of all those. And then all you have are timestamps. And then the next line is the text. And then you write an equation, and I can tell people more details of this if they want. You write an equation that looks for, is this even or odd? Because it's every other. And then I filter it to just true. So I only get the lines of text, and then I copy and paste that out and put it into a Word document. And then I have just the text for me. Because when you download it with anything from YouTube, it gives you all kinds of crazy timestamps. So that's how I get rid of the timestamps. And then I take it into Word, and then I do find and replace, because there's lots of enters for everything. So I replace all the enters with spaces, and there's no punctuation or anything in there. And I kind of clean it up, but I use all the words that I actually say. And when I don't have a script, I do mess up some technical stuff. And sometimes I'll put like in parentheses a little asterisk. Like if I told the wrong wire to be plugged in whatever place, I'll do that even in the closed captions.
Yeah, so Chico says, oh wait, is my mic on? Yes, it is. So he says he actually liked writing the script as if he was talking to a friend, because it gets me to think about tones, jokes, and things like that. Also try to leave big time gap between scripting and recording. I also read the whole script out loud 1 to 2 times before recording to get some muscle memory on how I want my flow to be like. It feels funny because I even end up rehearsing facial expressions, and allows me to fine tune things like that. It feels a bit like acting. It's funny because I think I was talking to someone recently who kind of like talked about how like in a way it is kind of like acting, because you do have like some of us who are on screen, like you have that on-screen personality that it is yourself, but like in a way also like, you're trying to be a good presenter, and you're trying to like be precise and intentional and things like that. So it is kind of like practicing your acting skills.
Yeah. It's not even kinda. It definitely is.
For sure. It just sounds so weird to say, because I'm always trying to be like, I am being myself.
No, nobody on YouTube is 100% their authentic self. If you were, no one would watch it, because your personality is like, nobody's personality is bombastic enough to hold people's attention on YouTube for that long. Like you have to play it up a little bit, and you start to fall into that groove. Although I do all of this because I'm talking about writing a script like you're talking to a friend. I tried doing that, but I realized very early on that I am a terrible writer.
I thought you were going to say terrible friend.
No, that's a whole different story. That's a different stream. But I am just, writing has never been a strong skill of mine. I've never been that good, and I've practiced and I've tried really hard, and my writing has improved quite a bit, but it's not a strength. But I know that my like riffing and verbal stuff is very, very good, and that's what I played that strength. That's probably why I'm so advocating such a loosey-goosey process. But definitely, if you are going to be like doing lines and doing it like you're like fully scripted word for word, you definitely need to rehearse it several times before you record, because otherwise, yeah, like you're not going to know it. Like that's why teleprompters are used in everyday events. It's when you have to have an entire speech ready to present right away, like when you're a politician or something. But like if you're going to be doing a presentation in a video that is recorded, then definitely memorizing and practicing and getting it down several times is definitely the optimal way to do that.
Yeah, and I think if you're doing like faceless videos, like faceless recordings, like I usually do, that can also still help. Like one thing that I actually do before narrating all my videos is I read through the whole thing, or read through the whole thing because I have a bad habit of narrating the whole thing at once. But I read through the whole thing like, 1 or 2 or 3 times. And what that actually allows me to do, I found out, is sometimes like a few sentences, I can read through a sentence and then just look away while I'm saying the sentence. I find that actually helps me say the sentence a bit more clearly. Because like you notice, like right now I'm improvising everything I say. I'm not stumbling upon my words. And like when I read something, I notice I stumble upon my words a lot more. So that definitely helps to those of you who have similar troubles with that.
I also find that a lot of times I'll write something out, and I'm so used to academic writing that I'll include so many parenthetical phrases and so many words that have a lot of sibilance or, unexpected alliteration. And it's only when I read it out loud that it becomes kind of comical, or I realize, oh, no human can actually say those words. And so it's only after the read through that I realize how much rewriting I have to do to make it palatable for a YouTube video.
Now you do occasionally work with an actor.
That's right. Yeah.
And how does that go? Like, how does the line reads go with that? Like, what's that process like?
So that's really interesting. So we work with two main hosts actually, and we're very fortunate in that our hosts are very curious people. And so they're reading through the script the first time, and we let them know, there may be some changes, but they take it upon themselves to actually do a little research so they understand what they're saying. And so they can deliver it with confidence, and they know that, oh, this is actually a very easy point, or this is the more complicated point. And so we're just really lucky to get to work with thoughtful people like that. I understand that if you don't have a very experienced host, then you may actually have to be present for a lot of line reading and a lot of rehearsing, but we haven't found that we needed to do that.
Especially because, like, I know that you have one series where, like, your acting direction would be you're supposed to be a robot that kind of that teaches programming.
Exactly. But thankfully, that host of ours, Olka, she actually is a programmer, and so it really does, make a lot of sense to her. And she just has a great sense of humor and is really enjoying having this alter ego. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would add, like, even if you don't have actors or if you don't have hosts, you do have to think that you are an actor, you are a presenter, you do need to practice. If you're still in university, like, go to your Toastmasters club and start practicing this stuff, because it is a skill that is kind of necessary on YouTube. Like, you need to really have that sort of fluidity and that comfort with talking. And there's lots of it's a skill that pays dividends in like every corner of your professional life if you work on it. So it's not an invaluable. Is invaluable? Is this like an inflammable
it's
thing?
Like inflammable, yes. It is invaluable. It's an invaluable skill.
It's an invaluable skill. The other one I would recommend, and this is something I have on my docket, is take improv classes. Even just an introductory one can do quite a bit for you. But being able to practice your stuff. Like, we are teachers, but we want to be like good teachers, right? We want to be able to get through, and YouTube is a format that really punishes you for not being relatable. And so you gotta find a way to do what actors have been doing, which is trying to get a personality through a screen and to another person in another room in another context effectively.
No, I definitely found that when I was teaching, I was doing classroom teaching for 8 years at the high school level. And then before that, I was doing some teaching at the college level. And it felt like the longest running Broadway show ever, because that certainly wasn't me. You know, it was aspects of me. But you really do have to learn how to modulate your voice and learn how to hold attention and, you know, pace yourself. And all of that is acting. And I think those of us who have done classroom teaching are experiencing some interesting kind of translation of that to YouTube, where you don't have anyone to play off of anymore. And so that's been the biggest challenge for me, I think.
Yeah. Some simple things that I do are, one, I always make sure I'm smiling when I start. Right before like I turn on the camera, I make sure I'm smiling, because sometimes I'm there, like I forget, or sometimes I'll just like shake like right before a take. And the other thing is, you don't have to be perfect at this at once. If you go back through any of our videos, like it's a progression. So usually just pick one thing that you're like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this, and focus on proving that. And when that's done, you'll notice something else that you might want to work on. But don't worry about fixing all the things at once. Just pick one thing to work on until you get it to where you want, and then pick another thing. Or else you drive yourself crazy because you're going to wear 80 different hats.
Yeah, and there are resources too if you want to work on certain things. Like I said, if you are a university student, or if you are a working at a university, checking out the Toastmasters Club on campus, if they got one, they usually have one, is a pretty good way to get started. It's like a public speaking club. It's really, really useful. Another one would be, if you can, this one will probably end up costing some more money, which is improv class. Which is just getting you to think on your feet and think in a presentational mindset and communicate with your whole body and things like that.
Yes, and?
Yes, and.
I read recently Alan Alda's book, and something like, if I understood you, would I have this look on my face? It's something like that. And he talks about how he has been, you know, encouraging science communicators to take improv classes, and how much it improves their delivery and everyone's understanding. So I believe him. I'm too chicken.
Storytelling lessons and storytelling classes are also really good for this. Another one, if you can't go to any classes, another thing that would be really good for helping with scripts and stuff like that is reading John Truby's book, The Anatomy of Story. And really do think about, even if you're teaching a lecture, even if you're teaching superposition or science stuff, to think of it in the terms of characters and getting like a narrative tension and getting from point A to point B, because it'll make your stories way more effective. Like a good example for science would be to take a look at the channel Eons, that is really employing storytelling methods to tell stories of paleontology. And I think that they're doing it better than anybody in the Complexly cloud, which is a pretty high bar to hit.
If you listen to, was it Tim Schmoyer? He's really pushing that stories on YouTube is the new big thing. And he thinks it's going to be the new big thing for like 2 or 3 years. If you're trying to do that. And I know Destin has graphs that he has for his videos where he ramps up, like he has 2 things that he graphs for his videos: personality and complexity. So he starts out with a lot of personality, and he ramps up the complexity. And when it gets really complex and he thinks he's going to lose a lot of people, then he ramps it back down and ramps up the personality again at the end of videos. So even stuff like that, if you want to just play around with like, what arc am I going to do my videos? That's something I know I'm personally trying to fix.
I did kind of like recently Corey from 12 Tone had a video where he was kind of in a way like following that graph, but then he kind of turned it on its head, where of course like he was talking about what was it? Which song was it? Which video was it? In any case, I don't remember which one it was, where of course he was getting into these really like quite complicated, especially for someone like me who's doesn't know anything about music theory. It was starting to get very complex. And then I think he said, okay, I have a feeling that like I might lose some of you, but I'm just gonna dive right into it. And I think that was like a really like clever way of like he just kind of went progressively down more and more like complex and niche, but in a way he was playing to that because a lot of people do go to his channel for deep dives into music theory. So I think that was a good way to do it. Personally.
Yeah. I think that the Tim Schmoyer thing that really fits the whole thing is we spend so much time on We Create EDU and in these conversations to the point where it's like, wow, we are wasting so much of our time just arguing about what it is that a machine learning algorithm that changes 20 or 30 times a day, what it wants. And Tim Schmoyer, I think, comes to the thing is like, you're not ever going to be able to figure out what the beast wants. And what you really need to do is focus on what YouTube is designing this whole mechanism for anyway, which is optimize your video for the thing that people have been optimizing things for decades, which is to make things entertaining and engaging. And I mean, we have a century of cinematic history and lessons to learn on how to do that.
This is true. Jacqueline, did you wanted to talk about the link you posted a little while ago, or was that from before?
Sure. The link I posted when we were talking about editing and reading your script out loud and stuff, it made me think of CGP Grey because he just wanders around his office with thunder noises in the background, reading his scripts aloud with his iPad Pro. And he does, the reason his are so good is because he highly researches and highly edits. He says he's also a terrible writer. And he edits many drafts. And that's the link I showed, was a blog post he has where he goes through and he makes marks and says like why he edited his script the way he did. So if that helps anybody.
Oh, I want that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so I definitely, script writing is kind of one of our next questions, but I think we covered quite a bit of it, which is like for me, like I tend to like keep working at the script over and over. Like I usually do an initial draft and I will edit it's quite often like I end up like writing and rewriting. But the problem is you can get into that cycle where you just keep writing and then you don't get to the video. And I think sometimes it's important to balance. Like it's hard to know when the script is perfect because it's like, writing is a creative pursuit. It's very difficult to know when you're done. So
yeah, it's never about perfect. It's about having few enough complaints about what you're putting out that you're okay with it going on the internet.
Yeah, no, we tend to be perfectionists about almost every aspect. And thankfully, I feel like I've gotten much faster at writing over the years, and I'm willing to just put a script out there. I think it's just because I feel more confident in my writing than in my editing skills. And so I find it harder to let go of the edited video as opposed to the edited script. But what I found is that it's really important, like most writing, it's really important to have a plan ahead of time and to have an outline. And when I'm tempted to go on way out there diversions, I can bring it back to my outline and say, look, you only have a certain number of paragraphs to get your point across. There's no time for this. And so sticking to my plan has been really helpful for script writing.
So actually, so Micah, was that you who just posted a general question from you, or was that someone from the chat?
Yeah, that's just from me.
Okay, if you want to ask a question.
Sure, yeah. So I was thinking about time saving and how we all use different methods. And I'm curious, what's the one tool, either hardware or software or even a process, I guess, but the one tool that has saved you the most time in making videos?
My life organized.
Either
Google Calendar.
Hardware-wise, probably lav mics because I am awful at editing audio, and then software-wise, just doing a Premiere workflow that with all the tabs at the top is 10,000 times easier.
Oh, the book, The Checklist Manifesto.
Can you give more?
That's on my to-read list. So
It's a book about how the technology of checklists and standardizing checklists has revolutionized so many disciplines and has led to so many crises from being averted, lives being saved, literally in the case of like surgery and like flying airplanes and stuff like that. But it shows that the idea of having everything, like every project, broken down into discrete steps that are 100% there, that you can then copy from one project to the next and optimize, is one of the best mental inventions humans have ever done, and yet we don't give it the love that it deserves.
yeah, that book is definitely on my to-read list, and yeah, it is. It's interesting. But I mean, I haven't read it, but like one thing that, like over the years, like my like full-time job, like doing managing construction projects. This is one of those things where like you really have to balance, or you really have to. It's like an art, like writing a good checklist, because if there's too much, then like people won't read it and people won't follow. Like if you put too many things that are like obvious steps and that people like people won't actually read it or won't actually use it. But then if then you don't put the important steps that are necessary on the checklist, then then the building collapses. So it is like, that is something that's, I would definitely like to get better at.
My step back checklist is well over 300 or 400 steps long.
Yeah. Mine's too. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I'm willing to share it with people if anybody asks for it. If anyone really wants to go.
I would love to see that. That sounds fascinating.
Sure.
Yeah, mine's like 240 steps, but you can put things on there. Like I put things like charged batteries, clear SD cards, like all the things that I've done that have been failures of mine in the past, I put into a checklist. Or if you're going to, like we travel a lot in film, like at events, and you really want checklists for packing. Like, do you have your mic? Do you have the proper cords? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually I have a checklist for archiving videos on Final Cut Pro, because for some reason, just for the life of me, literally, even though I do it at the end of every video, I just cannot remember what the steps are. Like, it's not even that complicated. It's like 5 or 6 steps, and you just have to click these buttons and consolidate your assets. But like one thing I want to make sure I do is I delete the render files, because I don't want it massively clogging up my hard drive. So then like sometimes I forget to do that. So I have to have a checklist, and every time even though at this point I've done it like, feels like hundreds of times, like I'm still going to the checklist, because otherwise and maybe because I've now trained myself into having to go through the checklist now, without it I can't function. That might be the issue. So
like GPS, you can't navigate without
for sure
your phone in your car anymore.
Yeah. Kim, what about you? What has been your...
It's funny. So I've been thinking about that. I've been hoping to go last, because there isn't one thing that I can point to. I have to say, for me, it's been a slow, gradual improvement in my efficiency, like hundreds of little things, like as little as plugging everything in the studio into a couple of power strips, so I can just turn on three switches, and now my studio is just about ready to go. Or Jacqueline mentioned having strips of tape. Like I do that for our lights that light up our green screen, because we use them for some other stuff. And so, I'll bring them into the studio and set them there, and now they're pointed at least basically in the right direction. Like 100 little things like that have saved me time, and I've had to accumulate those over the years to figure out all the different things that I could be doing better.
Do you have some sort of like system for self like reassessment to like think like, oh, what's a way I can make this work better, or something like that like would be like kind of like a process that you use for constantly improving things? Maybe that could be it.
No, that's a good question. I would say that one thing I have been doing for about the last 6 months to a year is keeping track of how much time I spend on tasks. Like we've made up an Excel spreadsheet with most of our major tasks. And so we use the Pomodoro technique where we work like 20, 25 minutes at a time on a task. And so I'm just keeping track of how many Pomodoros does it take for me to do something. And that's the one thing, that's the one tool that I can point to say, I'm really falling behind in this. I need to find a way to simplify this and just make it easier on myself. So, if you can find a way to be a little bit more self-aware and do a little self-assessment, I think that in and of itself is really helpful.
Kim, I think I can't remember if it was you who I talked to about this at EduCon, because I had mentioned, so like I use Toggl to track all of my time. I'm not, so I don't, for those of you who don't know, Toggl is an app where you can track your time. And some people are, I think kind of crazy. They track like everything in their lives, like from sleeping to eating to playing video games. I haven't done that yet because it'll probably scare me what the results are. So I'm just tracking like working time right now. And for instance, right now I have, I'm tracking doing a hangout. And because I had been doing prep work and stuff before, like I'm tracking like how much time that it kind of took me to get things set up, just so, because again, this is basically my first time doing this. I want to know like how much time in advance I should prepare for. And yeah, so it's like and it's one of those things that the first time you do it, it takes you forever. Like I started trying to get this set up like an hour before and I was still rushing at the end. Whereas over time, you can see yourself like, hopefully getting better and spending less time doing the same thing. So,
but you bring up such an important point too, is that if you have been tracking your time, it gives you a more realistic picture of how long it's going to take you. Because I used to say just offhand, oh, it takes me 2 days to edit this video. And, really, when I add it all up, it's like, no, you spent 4 days. Be realistic. Yeah. Don't try and paint yourself in a corner and promise that you can deliver a video in 2 days when you can't. You cannot.
So Cheryl actually, she just said she loves using the technique, Kim, that you mentioned. I think it was the Pomodoro technique.
That's right.
But yeah, so no, for me it was like. I started doing it years ago at work because, it was like somebody would ask me, oh, how long does it take for you to do whatever this part of the project? And they just won't believe me when I say, no, like it's going to take you 3 days. And they're like, no, it's like 3 hours. I'm like, well, why don't we just time ourselves and see what it actually is instead of arguing? Because I can assure you it takes twice to 3 times to sometimes 10 times as long as you think. So,
yes. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, okay, I think we're going on almost an hour and a half, so I'm going to call out to the chat people to, if you have any additional questions, feel free to type it in now, and then I'll just kind of quickly mention the thing that I had come to mind about. Like, again, I have many different things over the years that I think have helped me personally, but for me, the thing that has saved me the most time personally, I believe, is actually not a software or a hardware. It's a technique called Inbox Zero. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's a email management technique developed by this person called, proposed by this person called Merlin Mann, who spoke, I believe, at a Google presentation a few years ago. But it's basically this very simple way to manage your email, which is again, you can watch the whole presentation, or I'm going to try to find a link and post it later. But it's basically you, if you have an email that comes in and you can address it in 2 minutes, just do it. If you don't, if it takes more than 2 minutes, you flag it or you put it on a pending list or to be addressed list. And then if it's something that's not actionable, like you get an email newsletter, or if it's just a bulletin, you delete it or archive it. So instead of trying to file things into like 700 different folders or trying to come up with like some crazy organizational system, it's kind of just like a very simple management system. There's a little bit more to it in his presentation, but basically for me, like, this has made me stay on top of email for years. Like my inbox is not always zero, but almost always. And the thing I get is a lot of people always say, oh, you must not get a lot of emails. And I'm like, no, it is the exact opposite. The reason why I had to have a crazy, like rigorous email system is because I get so many emails. So anyway, I just want to put that out there.
That's awesome. I need that for my life, I think.
Yeah. And again, for me, it's like whether it's Articulations life or my work life, that's, I still swear by it.
And you go ahead.
Oh no.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say for Gmail and stuff, you can add because your inbox shouldn't be your checklist or to-do list. There's lots of add-ons you can do, like if you're using Asana, that you can actually just send those emails to task managers that way. So that way you don't have your inbox. Like you should have two things. I think you should have a place where you store all your reference material, a place where you store all your tasks. And none of that should be in your brain. And I'm struggling very hard, but that's my goal in life.
Getting things done?
Yeah, is a place with a reference material, a place for everything done, and I know what to do next. That's my goal in life.
Yeah,
oh, that sounds so nice.
Yeah, no, Inbox Zero is basically the application of getting things done to an email system. So did you have a comment on that, Tristan?
It's a good book that everyone should read.
It is. So although it is a little dated, personally, like, because I read it, a couple years ago, and it's one of those where it was written during a time of not digital.
Yeah, there's a 2015 edition though.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Yes, there is. I have not read that one yet. So
I'll lend my one tool that saved me the most time, which is a plugin for After Effects. For those of you that use After Effects, it's called Mr. Horse Animation Composer. And all it is just a bunch of presets. And since we do a ton of, animating of things flying on screen, like I used to keyframe everything, and now it's just like made that whole process 50 times faster. So anyway.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Horse.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Horse Animation Composer. I'll put a link up in the chat.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic.
And Jacqueline, what was the link you just shared?
Oh, that's Merlin Mann's site, 43 folders. That's his getting done methodology. He used actual folders and goes through Inbox Zero.
Awesome. Cool.
Are you still waiting for questions from the chat?
Yes. Am I haven't seen anything, but so far.
Do you mind if I run through a few apps real quick? And I'll do it as quick as possible.
No,
so I use Text Expander. I got it before it became a subscription. So you do short little things, like I do SJYT, and that fills out my entire description for my YouTube channel, like everything I usually put in there, like that kind of stuff. Or I'll do, it's like W2W, and it actually fills out like an invite for We Create EDU people. It puts contact We Create EDU in the send to, and then it tabs down twice, goes to the blind carbon copy, inserts everything in my clipboard, which is all the email addresses of the person I'm inviting, and then it puts the title in, and then it puts like all the text inside of the actual email that I use again and again. So just like simple snippets that save me a lot of time. If you're doing timing and you want it to happen automatically, you can use timing for a Mac, or rescue time if you're using PC. I think you know more about this, Betty. IFTT kind of stuff is another great automation thing. And if you're using a Mac, I also use something called Workspaces, where I'll just put in like editing, and then I'll have it set up where it opens every application, every website, every folder, everything that I need for editing, like all the asset folders, everything with one click of a button. So those are some things that help me. I'll put links later.
Awesome. So I was just going to say, if you could put links to that. So I have, I was kind of taking, pulling some of the links that you, of things that you guys talked about into the show notes of the, for the Hangout. So if you guys, I think everybody who has the link is able to edit. although I could be wrong. So if you could go in there and plop some of your links of the things you've introduced in there. So I think it looks like we haven't gotten any other questions in the chat, although we do have small EDU creators that say, hi, hi all, great to see all the EDUtubers support here, which is awesome because that's what we do. Yeah, so does anybody else have anything they want to add before we go off air?
Always be working on your process. Like, I guess, like, if there's one piece of advice you could walk away with, is that after you finish a video, assess how the video went and try to see if you can find a way to make things better.
It helps if you have a work kitty. So
yeah, I got kind of mobbed.
Oh.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. So yeah, this is the first hangout that I have hosted. So we're hoping to do more of these. There's going to be at least one a month. I'm currently planning the next one, and and again, as always, like if you have ideas on what you want to talk about, guests you want to invite, and things like that, please send me a message or just let me know, and we'll try to make it happen. And yeah, so thanks again everyone for joining us. And Jacqueline, just so I'm doing this properly, I clicked the stop broadcast button, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do that, and I believe then we go off air. So
Thanks, Betty.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Betty.